Good morning. I'm Krista Campbell. Thank you for joining us today for Rural Utility Puts GIS to Work. Today we have special guests from Oldham County Water District, Russ Rose, Chief Executive Officer, and Kenny Ratliff, GIS Manager. Russ and Kenny are going to share Oldham County's GIS story from the start in 2001 when they first began using GIS and GPS to where they are today with an enterprise implementation. I hope you enjoy the webinar. We're going to get started.
All right. Thanks, Krista. I'm Russ Rose. Thanks for having us here today. I'll start by telling you a little bit about me and then go in and talk about the water district. I started had a construction background and started my career in the water business a little over 21 years ago as the meter disconnect guy. And like many other folks in small systems, I worked my way up into the management side of the water industry. I came to Oldham County Water in 2006, and at that point, we already knew the need for quality and accurate mapping. So I'll tell you just a little bit about the district. The district is organized pursuant to Chapter 74 of the Revised Statutes of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We are a political subdivision of the Commonwealth, and we're regulated by the Kentucky Public Service Commission. The district, it was started several years ago. Originally, it was two small districts that came together and were formed in the early 80s. When they merged, both of the districts started in the early 60s, but in the 80s, they were merged together and became what is now known as the Oldham County Water District. And we serve approximately about 2/3 of Oldham County with potable water service.
Thanks, Russ, for that introduction. Today's topics, my story, WebGIS, applications, and then we're going to hear Oldham County Water District's GIS story. Organizations that started using GIS many years ago probably have a similar story to myself and to Oldham County Water District. Whether you started with a Unix workstation using ArcInfo or came to GIS a little later taking advantage of ArcView on the desktop, the universal challenge has always been how to develop your data. Where will the data come from? How will it get into the GIS? When I started working in GIS, the first task was usually creating the map. What I mean by this is the points, lines, and polygons, getting your assets into the GIS so that you have a map. This wasn't a task that was quickly accomplished. My GIS story starts with a lot of digitizing and drafting. I'm sure that those of you that remember digitizing boards are chuckling a little bit right now. For those of you that are new to GIS, digitizing was a process where you used an electronic board in puck, which was similar to a mouse, to trace a printed item into your GIS. The paper product would be registered on the board so that the geographic reference was known by the GIS. I traced shorelines to create digital nautical charts. I worked with many engineers over the years, and I learned to use CAD early in my career. This might sound a little easier than digitizing, but that wasn't always the case. About the time that GIS moved to the desktop, I was hired by a water utility as their GIS CAD operator. The utility maps were all on paper and linen, 14-inch by 14-inch inked linen. Some of you can probably guess what came next. The maps were scanned and vectorized into line work within the CAD system. Much of the line work was broken and overlapping. I spent weeks, months, and eventually more than a year editing and aligning the vectors before they shaped into a map of our distribution system. Once this was completed, I was ready to bring it into our GIS and to engage with my colleagues across the utility. The engineering team helped to coordinate updates to our system. They were the ones that helped with new assets and as-built. I also worked with treatment and distribution. They needed the map to support their workflows, and they provided feedback when something wasn't quite right. The city IT department provided support when we wanted to integrate with other systems. I'm sharing this story because it helps to explain my enthusiasm and excitement about today's tech, how GIS has evolved and continually advanced to make our jobs easier. Today we have WebGIS. The ArcGIS platform is a WebGIS. It is more than a desktop product. It's more than server or online. It's a platform consisting of many components that include desktop, server, online, as well as applications. With today's WebGIS, we can quickly get started, and then we can grow our GIS as our needs grow. Esri defines WebGIS as a type of distribution information system that uses web services to deliver data and capabilities. It can be implemented in the cloud using ArcGIS Online, on-premise using ArcGIS Enterprise, or it can be implemented using a hybrid approach of both. I started this discussion on the topic of making a map, getting information into your GIS. Looking at this from my perspective today, I'm really excited. I have to say that moving to a WebGIS platform might have been intimidating or scary at first, but what it's done is it's enabled Esri to provide solutions and applications that give my story a happy ending, because now I have applications that enable mobile devices like tablets and phones to collect and edit data immediately, making it available within my GIS. Let's talk about applications for a few minutes. There are many applications supported by WebGIS, apps for the field, the office, and for the community. I'm going to discuss a few of them before we get to Russ and Kenny. ArcGIS Online is an online collaborative WebGIS that allows you to use, create, and share maps, scenes, apps, layers, analytics, and data. ArcGIS Online is an essential part of the ArcGIS platform. You can use it to extend the capabilities of ArcGIS Desktop and Enterprise. I really love ArcGIS Online because of this sharing capacity. It's so easy to share now. Collector for ArcGIS is our most popular mobile app. It is a map-centric application that uses web services and a web map to make it easy for field crews to access data, edit data, and validate data. I've used Collector myself, and I really wish I had had it when I first started my career. Survey 123 for ArcGIS is a simple and intuitive form-centric data gathering solution that makes creating, sharing, and analyzing surveys possible. The strength of Survey 123 is that it uses logic. The answers provided within the form determine the next question or set of questions. This is a great tool for field staff because it leads them to the data they need to collect without excessive training. Explorer for ArcGIS provides access to your maps everywhere you go using a mobile device. It allows you to search the map. It includes a markup tool, and you can communicate your ideas and share them with others using this markup tool. Explorer makes maps easily accessible to everyone that needs to see them. It provides updated information to teams that may not have GIS as part of their daily workflow. And story maps. This is one of my favorites. Esri story maps let you combine authoritative maps with narrative text, images, and multimedia content. They make it easy to harness the power of maps and geography to tell your story. Story maps are a great way to share information across your organization as well as with the public. So I'm going to just take a minute to have you answer a polling question. What Esri applications are you using? ArcGIS Online, Collector for ArcGIS, Survey 123 for ArcGIS, Explorer for ArcGIS, and the last option is Story Maps. I was curious to see if the rest of you are using these applications and finding them as useful. Okay, most of you are using ArcGIS Online, about 91%. We have more than 60% using Collector for ArcGIS. And then we're in the 30% for Survey 123 and Explorer, about 50% for Story Maps. So I've closed the poll, and this is what you guys have really been waiting for, is to hear from Russ Rose, our Chief Executive Officer at Oldham County Water District, and Kenny Ratliff, GIS Manager. I know you heard a little from Russ earlier, so let's go ahead and pass it back to them so that you can hear more about the work they're doing and what's going on at Oldham County.
Thanks, Krista. I appreciate that. So I'm going to start out. I already told you a little bit about the Water District and how it came together. Started in the early 60s, but then came together as it is today in the 80s by merging two smaller districts together. At that time, those districts had about 2,100 customers, and today we've grown to where we serve about 8,400 customers actually, and we serve about 2/3 of the geographic size of Oldham County. Kenny's got it there on the map. To the west side of Oldham County, that area is served by the Louisville Water Company, and we're really just a bedroom community for Louisville. On the eastern side of the county, we have an area served by the LaGrange Utilities Commission, and they purchase their water wholesale from us. So it's kind of unique, being mainly three water systems in the county. One of the first things that we realized when we started doing GIS is we started looking for low-hanging fruit and what could we get done. And Kenny developed this map that you can see where you can go in, a customer can type their address and immediately show where they are in our system. It populates it, and they can see whether they're a customer for Oldham County Water or whether they would be served by the LaGrange Utilities Commission or by the Louisville Water Company. This has been a great tool for both our customers and for even our workers. If they're not familiar with an area and somebody calls in and says, hey, I'm getting ready to build a house, I live at this address, are you my water service provider? So we've been a long, Oldham County Water has always been a proponent of technology, but it's that age-old question of, how can I get the most bang for my buck, and how can I make this work so that we're utilizing our funds to the greatest extent. So the water district, we currently have about 370 miles of pipe, and that pipe ranges from 3/4 inch service lines all the way up to 36-inch mains. Our source water comes from the Ohio River alluvial aquifer. They are 130-foot deep water wells. They're near the Ohio River, but they're served from the aquifer. We serve on average somewhere around 3.5 to 4 million gallons of water a day. We have a capacity at our treatment plant of 13 million gallons a day, so plenty of room for expansion. And we peak out in the summertime somewhere around 7 million gallons a day. So not a super large system, but I would call it a medium-sized system here in the state of Kentucky. We treat about 1.2 billion gallons a year annually. This is a picture recently. This area is normally not flooded, but we recently had a lot of rains here in the state, and we had a significant flood event. This is the largest flood we've had, I think, since '97. And then from '97, you have to go back several years since we've had rains like this. But we had the majority, Kenny will show you a little video here, the majority of our wells, 9 out of 10 of our wells were actually surrounded by water. And we had no significant impact from that, just basically because it's the groundwater system, and we're not influenced by surface water at all. So we got to take a little drone video. This is actually a view here of our treatment plant, and you can see it was not affected by the flood at all. But that shows we have a couple million gallon clear well there at the plant. Generator capacity. Here's a view of one of the wells completely surrounded by water. This side here, the water is probably around 8 feet deep in this area. And you can see right there, that's the top of a travel trailer camper that's on an adjoining property. And you can just barely see the top of it. So the water's about 8 feet deep here. And the camera, I think, is going to spin around, and you'll get a view back toward land. All this area here would normally be not underwater. And so we used our system to collect. We followed the water as it rose. For the future, we wanted to be able to go back and say, okay, at this point, where would the water level be? You know, if we know that the flood stage is X, we want to know where that's going to put us in our well fields. So Kenny created some data tables and it allowed us to follow that and track it. And so the next time that it happens, we'll be able to know exactly where the water level is going to get to, or where it's headed and how it could impact us. I talked about roughly how large we are. I think one significant thing, and most systems probably are seeing this, as we've grown, as example, in the last 10 years, we've grown from about 7,800 customers to the 8,400 that we have now. But we are actually selling less water today than we did 10 years ago. And I think that's significant, that we have to continually look for ways to save money, because we've still got the same expenses. We're still operating the same, we're still maintaining the same infrastructure, but we're actually selling less water today. And a lot of that may be because of water saving devices or just conservation in general. But we continually look for those ways to be able to do that. So we take our infrastructure very seriously. We're constantly evaluating what systems need to be updated and improved. And we started looking at GIS in the early 2000s, Oldham County Water did. And we basically started out with a mapping grade GPS unit that was sub-meter. And we just went out, started gathering lines, valves, hydrants, whatever infrastructure we could get, because we knew that this is the next big thing coming. I think most small systems, at least here in Kentucky, would agree that one of the significant problems that we've had over the years, and you mentioned it, Krista, is going back to our paper maps. A lot of us didn't have good as-built drawings. So we were lucky in some cases if we had construction drawings, which we all know that those are not 100%. Things change in the field. Maybe line got moved to the other side of the road, or it got moved back around a significant structure that was in the way. And I've been saying for years that GIS is going to be the next big item for small and medium-sized water systems for the next several years. And we knew that we needed something that our employees could have. It could be on the go. They could take it with them. They could have a map in the field. And then we wanted those folks to be able to participate in the data collection. Those field crews, they're the folks that know where all the infrastructure is. And I think for years here in Kentucky, some folks saw that as job security. Well, I know where the valves are. I'm not going to tell anybody else. They're not on a map. You know, that's job security. Well, now we're having those guys collect this data, send it back to Kenny. Kenny's able to put it accurately on a map, and it's just a huge improvement for us. We know accuracy is very important, and one of the most recent things that we've really been focusing on in 2013, we went away from mapping grade equipment, and we wanted to go to a more survey grade type equipment. We wanted our accuracy to be even closer. And at that time, we purchased a Trimble Juno unit. We paired that with an R4 receiver, and that allowed us to get down to survey grade type accuracies. And as the data moves forward and technology gets better, you know, it's such a great thing to be able to go out there and gather this point. It doesn't matter if it gets covered up or if it's where the pipe is. We can go right back to it within basically a centimeter and know that that's where we are, and there's no question about it. So anyway, at this point, I'm probably going to tell you a little bit about Kenny. In 2016, We were very fortunate enough that we were able to hire Kenny and bring Kenny on board. And Kenny has a significant GIS background, and I'll let him tell you a little bit about that. But we brought Kenny in. Kenny, I think, has taken us to the next level, and he, along with Esri, has brought in a enterprise type system. We started using ArcCollector. We're starting to use Survey 123 and get our field crews involved and basically use this data in its best possible way. So, Kenny, with that, I'll let you take over, tell a little bit about yourself, and you can get down in the nuts and bolts of what's going on here.
Thanks, Russ and Krista. This is Kenny Ratliff. As Russ said, I am the GIS Manager for Oldham County. I brought to this organization about 20 years of GIS experience in a lot of different aspects and areas, primarily public health. Several years spent supporting the Army National Guard in Kentucky emergency management organizations as a GIS manager as well. Did some consulting for a few years with the company, an Esri partner, and then landed here. And it's the elevation of our GIS game as it is would not have been possible without keeping management involved. So if you're looking for some takeaways today, that would be the first one. Having someone like Russ that can predict where he wants to go and where the GIS fits and embrace it and support it has been a huge reason that we have been able to do the things in the last several months that we are doing now. So 2016, and at the time I came on board, utility, and specifically water utility, was not something that I had worked with in GIS from that perspective. So my education has grown thanks to Russ and thanks to the staff here that have taught me what a fitting is, what different pipes, types, and sizes, and what they mean to the capacity of the system. So getting involved, if you're new to an organization, a utility organization especially, get involved out in the field and learn those particular things, and that will help you understand what the needs are ultimately that you can serve to. As you said, 2016, we came in and started looking at the current architecture, the current software. We were using some things and evaluating. And over the course of several months, we ultimately decided to go ahead and engage with Esri with the Small Utility Enterprise License Agreement. And prior to that, we had one copy of desktop software, which gave us a single ArcGIS Online. Using that from that setup, I started a little map called Field Communications, and that was intended for me to capture things, action items in the field that need to be collected with this Trimble Juno device. And our field crews, for example, would have a new meter install and come in and verbally tell me at that time, hey, we put a new meter in at this address. And I would know then, if I didn't write it down on a sticky note, that's why I created, I would miss it, so that's why I created the Field Communications. And we'll talk a little more about that process and how that has evolved, but that's essentially, after getting involved with the ELA, that's really where our enterprise GIS took off. And so Krista's lead-in with her story and the tools that are available now is a great fit for what we're going to see here, and I'm really just going to expand on that. Unfortunately, if you're looking for something huge and in terms of how we're doing things, you're probably going to be disappointed. This is really our story and how we've evolved with the different tools, where we're applying them, and there may be some tidbits here and there that will be beneficial. Hopefully you can take away from and utilize in your areas. So up until the ELA, this was really more of an experimentation using AGOL. We were limited with the viewers, obviously, that could use the maps in the field. Once we got to a point of the ELA, that expanded our ability to open up maps to the staff on their mobile devices. We utilize both Android and iOS devices. Our iPads, we have those actually purchased and given to some of the administrative staff here in the office, but we also supply those to our board members for their administration purposes and coordination. Our hope is to expand our map environment to those folks as we go into the future. All of our cell phones that are supplied to specific staff are the Android systems, and so the maps look a little different across the board. But the biggest thing about the iPad, we use that in conjunction with our new receiver to get our accuracy and use collector in a very efficient way. Primarily what we use AGOL for is controlling our activities as to who can see what and what's appropriate. So our groups, we use that to determine who needs to see what. So we've parsed out some different things, emergency services support. For example, if we have a disaster, we can quickly drop maps in there, share them with folks in other agencies. We have some contractors that we work with that we can, in this case, a company that has an AGOL environment, we're able to share some of our system information with them for evaluation and analysis. We're working with our fire departments this is a testing thing. We've set them up, set up a survey 123 to capture their flushing activities so we can see the amounts and report on our water losses as required. We have our executive area where folks like Russ can see dashboards, see maps that are more pertinent to decision making, administration, and then we have our field support where really the nuts and bolts of things are happening. I've also created a GIS dev area so that I can create maps and test some things before we roll those out to production. And then we have some special projects as well. So we, again, once we got the ELA, we were able to take on ArcGIS server and implement really a true enterprise configuration. So our catalog here shows our parent geodatabase, and we have our edit database. This is where our guys in the field can potentially edit some layers. One of those being our system flush application, which I'll talk about shortly. But on a regular basis, this information is reconciled to the parent, or what we use as the presentation piece in maps like for the Explorer side of things. Another benefit of having this in our SDE is that the SQL instance that this resides in also shares space with our customer management system, in this case United. And so we actually take and have merged or joined our meter information from our customer information system to our meter layer, and we are able to run updates on the map attribution so that we have the most updated information about who owns a meter or what the meter ID numbers and so forth are for our tracking benefits. So the backbone is collector for us currently, and it has really evolved from that single user, i.e. me using it to catch up with things in the field. And I'm going to use our example of a meter installation where we have a new meter going in. Previously, that was handled by word of mouth when I came on board, and I would have to go back out and take a day and catch up on these locations, capturing them with GPS. Because of that unit, the Juno being a survey grade device, it made it a little more difficult to process because it has to be exported, brought into the desktop environment, and then digitized from there. Once we opened up field comms to our staff and allowed them to put those dots on the map as these installations, for example, were going on, that still meant I had to go chase after that fact, and we had more than one visit at a site potentially. That quickly, our staff jumped on that, and so the number of points, as you'll see shortly, grew very quickly, and so it was difficult to keep up. So that's when we started to look at how can we do this better. and that led us to doing some research for a device that would get us to a centimeter grade accuracy for use with collector. And kudos, I'd like to give a shout out to Travis Anderson from Leax Water District in Ohio. He was very helpful. I'd seen an article in one of the Esri publications where they had been using an EOS device. And so I reached out to him and we had several great conversations. Eventually we took a month and evaluated the EOS receiver, and we paired that with our tablet, our iPad, and took it out in the field, and it got very comparable accuracies with the Juno. So we reserve our Juno Trimble for big projects where we know there may be some elevation differences occurring after, say, a state highway project where they'll come back and regrade over lines that we may have installed or moved or updated. And, Russ mentioned the accuracy earlier and why that's important. We are continuously updating our system locations in terms of, like if we dig up a service interruption to repair it, we're trying to capture that location with our best available device, whether it's the Trimble or the collector. We have found, because of the digitation process previously, areas where we've had a line on the map and it's drawn next to the road, but we've had a rupture and gone out, and in fact, the main was 46 feet away from where it was drawn on the map and across the fence in someone else's field. So we're capturing that and making those updates as we go. And the reason that's important is if you're trying to find that needle in a haystack, in this case, valve lid, in the middle of a field that's grown up or in the middle of the night during a break, you want to be able to get your staff to that point as near as you can. So we took a look once we engaged with the EOS Aerial receiver at just the meter side of things and looking at expanding the use of that. So what we did was took one of the devices in the tablet and assigned that to one of our field crews to keep on their work truck. And so as they put a meter in now, they are actually capturing that before they leave the site. So that would negate me having to go out with another unit or another staff member to go out and later capture that location. And we determined on an evaluation, a return on investment look, that doing it that way as opposed to our previous way saves us about $100 a meter on installation cost. And over time, on a year average, that would save us a little over $10,000 based on the staff time and the equipment involved. So that was a big turning point for us. And our intent is to expand the use with those type of receivers with collector. So this was one of Russ's hot buttons, was getting something to track our flushing activities. The state mandates that we take chlorine samples daily, at least one sample. And so we try to flush our entire system at least twice a year, actually. And so to do that, and I will show you a quick demonstration of how we're using that data and capturing it. But we go to our end-of-line hydrants. We take 4 samples daily, and we record in a related table the amount that we flush and the chlorine levels, and that adds up over time so that we can go back and do some analysis. And again, I'll touch on that briefly in the live fire exercise shortly. So this is the Explorer piece where we present maps to our folks that not necessarily have been trained in collection or using collector, and it helps isolate folks from potentially contaminating the data in collector by using it as a reference map. So these are static in the sense that you cannot update, and that's where we leverage the Explorer application for. And this is available on our iPads or our cell phones to all the staff here at Oldham County. Survey 123, we've used Survey 123 for some different one-off projects, kind of a testing capture, but we had a situation occur several months ago where one of our staff members went out, located our infrastructure, our water mains. The contractor ended up going away from the area that they had staked out where the work was to be done. They hit our 6-inch main, I believe it was, causing a rupture. So we had to take our staff, respond, fix that. When we sent them the bill because of their error, they came back and said that their project person on site said that we had not marked the lines, and so they wanted pictures proving that we had done so. And unfortunately, we were using Collector, and I took 3 pictures with Collector while I was marking the line for or locate and update on our map. But when we archive that after I digitized those locations, we were losing the pictures. So the next day after that break, I actually began to use ArcGIS Pro to archive that information to a different database where it retained the pictures. So unfortunately, we were not able to recoup about $1,500 in that particular instance for our time and effort on the contractor's strike. So now we are taking Survey 123, and we're actually training on this immediately following this presentation, training our staff for full implementation for our locate records. And we have a couple test records in here, and what this will enable us to do now is, as our staff do locates of our systems, we are capturing the date to visit, the confirmation number that we've assigned to it, addresses, and we're confirming, was it marked by the contractor or the homeowner or the property owner? Are we in or out of the area? How did we locate our lines? Was it with wire or with a location or with an excavator perhaps? And then how do we mark it? And we not only have the location of where that activity takes place, but we also have the ability to take up to 5 photos, which will show the before. So here's our work area. The gas has already been to that location. And then here are our blue flags where we've marked it. So we now can archive that in our repository and have that for future reference should we need it. And we have a signature block for our staff to sign off on. So now, Krista, I think we're doing pretty good on time. This is going to go pretty quickly. So I'm going to try to do a quick interface with the iPad and show you what these applications look like. So in our collector environment, we have our field communications that I mentioned earlier. Bear with me as the speeds have been on and off here, using actually a hotspot on my phone to drive this. So in collector, we have different, we created the layers that we most often use or that we see needs for. So we have a lot of new meters obviously going in. We have new valves occasionally if we have a break or a new system or an expansion of the system occurring. Hydrants, service interruptions, fittings, and spot locates. One of the things that we are doing now, we have a subdivision expansion occurring out in this area. And so our staff are going out on a daily, every couple of day basis as these lines are going in, being put in by the contractor. We are capturing every bale, every junction. And so on April 5th, one of our staff went out, captured that 8-inch bale, recorded it with collector, assigned it to me for action in the office, and you can see that we're getting about 3 millimeters accuracy and how that lays out then in where the installation is occurring. And as I'm digitizing this in, we can see that whole infrastructure piece begin to come together on the fly. So there you see this is the expansion occurring here and what they've completed, and then you see how far behind I am in the process of getting all this other information, the valves, the fittings, the hydrants, and so forth, drawn in. But that will give our administration folks like our supervisor and field supervisor and Russ an idea of where the projects are currently, status. So let's jump over to our flush tracking. And while this is loading, I'll just Well, there we go. So I mentioned the system flush tracking. These are all of our end-of-line hydrants. You can see that the reds are ones that we have not captured. And what I'm doing is on a monthly basis, I will go back at the first of the month 6 months ago. So whatever that 6 month would be, I go back and reset these hydrants to red so that we know they are again available for sampling. So our field staff know that, you know, if they have the opportunity to do a flushing or to do a water sample, a daily sample, that these red hydrants should have a priority to try to get to. And so we try to break those up in a grid square, 4 different parts of the county. And when we do this, for example, this hydrant, downtown Westport, we have some layer information. There's an eclipse with 1 outlet. We have the ability to add a new record, flush record, but we can view the old records. So this one has been hit several times. March 21st, we flushed 450 gallons. We recorded our chlorine levels and the hydrant condition. We go back and check a different date, and we have the same information, different time period. And then more recently, as of last Sunday, I actually added a note here describing the condition. Could stand to be straightened. Someone's tapped it, bent it over just a little bit. And what we can do from this point is add a field comm in that particular app to assign that to our supervisor for an action when it needs to be done. So just some other maps here. Some of these are because we're looking at my AGOL account, some of these are development type of map applications. We had the aerial testing map. We actually created a water utility collector training map for our staff to at any time go in and just, they can't tear something up. Utilizing some REST services from Esri and piggybacking on that. But that allows our folks to become familiar and to conduct training for them on collector and its use. So jumping out of this, just really quickly, we'll hit Explorer, and as you scroll through here, there's a lot of different maps, groupings. This is the reference map that our folks are able to use out in the field at any point. Do some tweaking here. So you see our service area, our line infrastructure. And one of the things that we do here is take advantage of, forgive me, I had this dialed in earlier. We take advantage of data that we do not own or administer. And so in this case, our planning and zoning group are members of Oldham County Information GIS Consortium, and they serve out services from the courthouse. And they are the authoritative source for things like the plats, the addressing. So we use that to our advantage by bringing those services in and using what they have put together. And so in this case, they have the parcels, streets, subdivisions, and we also bring in some latest imagery as a service from Logic, Louisville's GIS organization, in 2016. The advantage to using things like the planning and zoning information is that as these subdivisions are expanded, I'm able to, or a person in the field is able to pull up information about that entire area being developed, for example, and pull up a PDF of the original, the as-built or what was on file with planning and zoning. So again, just taking advantage of other services and other things that are out there and available. So I'm going to jump out of that, run through a couple of quick slides here and wrap this up. Our field staff have certain needs. Our office staff have some slightly different needs because they're our first line of communication many times with our customers. And a customer may call in and say, hey, I live at such and such address. There's a leak down by the fence post or by the telephone pole. And so our folks want to get a sense of what's going on and where. And we created this map, the OCWD map, and this resides internally on our network. It was constructed with the web app builder. they are able to see essentially the same information, but they don't really have an interest in things like altitude valves, system blow-off locations, and that sort of thing. So what we've done is parse this down a little bit, where they're mainly interested in address, parcels, meter locations, and perhaps valves. And we have the tools built in for determining lat and long. This map also utilizes those same services that I mentioned earlier. So one of the things that we have done lately, just recently, was implement a dashboard. And this one is based on our field communications application. And one of the, reset this. All right. So you are seeing where I was practicing earlier, results of that. So again, there's our field comms. There's currently 250 that are out there to have something done with. They may be open. So we have 41 that are currently open that need to be perhaps GPSed or some type of straightening of a hydrant, for example. We have 170 that have either been collected or the activity's been done, and I haven't cleaned any of those off, so I don't have any cleared or closed currently, just because I was prepping for this particular presentation. But we can go into our areas here, and if you'll watch closely, our supervisor has 13 open assignments or activities in his hopper. And so if you'll watch the activity by type, this is a summation of everything you see here in the map. If I click on that, this activity by type changes to just show the ones that have been assigned to him. He can then take a look at a hydrant, for example, and it cleans that particular thing off, or cleans all the other items off, rather. We open that up, and he can then drill in and take a look at an assignment that he has. And this one I know that it needs to be straightened, and this was captured just without, it was a phone capture without a GPS, but there's the picture that he can reference to see what the site looks like, and then he can determine who needs to do what and when from our staff. As these are closed out, they're being archived in ArcGIS Pro, and then once I reconcile and add to the default database, we're keeping track of our total meters that we have mapped as an ongoing analysis or assessment of our system. So where do we go from here? A lot of things that can happen. I was giving, prior to the start of the webinar, I was giving Russ some grief with Krista about the squirrels that we can get into, and I think a lot of organizations have those problems, or not problems. They're really good because they motivate you and stimulate you to the art of the possible. So some of the things that we'd like to do is expand that integration that I mentioned earlier with our customer management system to a point of interfacing potentially with something like Workforce, Esri Workforce, so that from an APA term, cradle to grave, start of an action or a work order that can be tracked all the way through our customer system, by our front office, by the folks in the field, by the administrative folks, and through Workforce we can see that from the GIS perspective as well, and I tie all that together. So we're working with our supplier for that system and how we can better integrate. We're looking hard at expanding the use of ArcGIS Pro. I think there's a 2.2 beta release that has just come out, and there's supposed to be updated geoprocessing features there. I'm anxious to test drive those because I think this is going to be a valuable product. There's things that I certainly like about it, and I'm excited about where it's going. One of the things that we came up this week, we do radio reads on our system. We want to do some route analysis to make better routes. We're overlapping in many cases, and we'll see if we can save ourselves some gas money. Develop some more customer-facing products, and then do some different things with analysis on the data for capital project planning and the like. So as Russ has said earlier, we've come a long way. There's been a lot of folks that have been involved in our path and our process. our partners down here in Louisville, Precision Products, really helped us out with our Trimble units through the early years. Our previous staff have done a wonderful job in creating the base for us to jump from and elevate our GIS game. And currently, like I mentioned, LEAX folks now that are doing some of the things are really helpful in us determining what we can take on or what might work for us. And we work close with folks like Travis and Carl Alexander from White House District there in Tennessee, and we continue to try to build our community and our network for going forward. So all this is really for the end game of 20 years from now. We hope that someone will look back from the Oldham County Water District perspective and say, man, those guys really came a long way, and what they did is providing benefit for us today. So with that, Krista, I think we're coming in on our closing time, but I think there's time for some questions, and I will turn the floor back over to you.
Thanks, Kenny. Yeah, we have a few minutes for questions, so we can get started on that. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my screen where we have our recording locations, and we have Oldham County Water District's website if you'd like to go there and check them out a little more. So Kenny and Russ, we have several questions about your implementation of these field applications, Collector for ArcGIS and Survey 123 for ArcGIS. I know you mentioned in the webinar that you're just getting started training your staff with Survey 123. Can you talk a little bit with Collector and how that training was? And did you face any challenges with existing staff that didn't want to use Collector? And how was that addressed?
Well, certainly I'll field some of that, and Russ can chime in from his perspective. But fortunately with Collector, several of our staff, when I came on board, had been using that off and on, so they were familiar with Collector. We have some new hires that have quickly, they're younger, and so they've adapted to the technology because they pretty much live off their phones and mobile devices, as most this younger generation seems to, and some of us older folks. But that being said, Collector was fairly easy. We do certainly have staff, very limited number that aren't really technology crazy. It's certainly a challenge to get those folks to understand the big picture and the end game, but we're chipping away at that. There's no set answer to how you get there. Survey 123, we tried to keep that as simple as possible. Just basically pass the questions through our staff, and what do we need to know, what's imperative that we get out of this, and keeping it simple really is the main piece of that. Russ, anything from your perspective on that?
No, I think that older employees that maybe aren't as technology savvy might be intimidated by it a little bit in the beginning, but once they used it a little bit, they saw the advantages that it could bring to them, then most of the time those folks were willing to embrace it. It's just getting them to initially start, and when they first start using it and they can see some advantages, get that low-hanging fruit out there for them, so that you can start showing these folks how they can utilize it in the field. Let them have a map that they can take with them, that they know that they've got all the time, and they're not carrying a map book that has to go behind the seat of the truck, that takes 3 guys to pick up. That's a huge advantage.
Kenny, I'm laughing because I remember those map books, and they had bolts that were like 3 pounds, just the bolts that held them together.
Exactly.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And if we had time, I'd tell you some funny stories about Russ and his infatuation with ArcReader and Publisher, but we'll save that for another day.
Well, I'll see you guys in August at Kentucky Rural Water, but let's get back on track. I think we're having that squirrel distraction you mentioned earlier. We did have a couple questions about the databases that you're using to manage your GIS. Can you talk about that a little bit more? And we have just a few minutes, but if you could just clarify why you have different databases and how they're used. I know you said one's a development, and I'll give you just a minute to answer that.
Okay, I'll try to answer that as best I can. So we have the edit database, and originally we were, let me start back over. We have the parent or the default database, and that's our presentation. That's where if we're going to serve out the latest information to the public, for example, in a public-facing map, or to our board members, we want that data to be as accurate as possible. And it's sitting there. It's not touched by a collector or by anyone that has an editing ability that really doesn't need to have it. So our edit database was set up with the intent of actually allowing our field staff to edit directly, say, a new water meter, or to move a valve, or to update the attribution in that. We experimented with that, but we decided that we really weren't comfortable with that particular level of integration. And so we created the field comms, and that's actually an AGOL hosted layer, which makes it a little bit simpler to manage as opposed to a service from ArcGIS server. But that's the reason we put so much emphasis on field comms. That's their means to digitize it, get it on the map, get it in front of myself here in the office so that I can take that and put it into that edit database. And then again, on a weekly cycle or a couple-day cycle, I will reconcile that, review those edits that have been made, and then push those to that parent database again for the ultimate presentation part of that. So again, it's just really having the ability to isolate and keep your data from getting contaminated is the main reason we split that up. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it did, Kenny. Thanks. I know we're out of time. I have one more question. Our attendees like your story map quite a bit, and they're asking if it's available to the public. I know you have a version of this that's available. Can you just quickly direct our attendees where to go to find that?
Yes, I know if I think our email is in here, and if someone would like to email me, that would be the most expedient way, I think, to get a link to that story map that is currently public. That was one that I did at the water conference out in San Diego this year. It tells a lot of the story. This expanded on that in terms of some of the things we're doing with Survey 123 and et cetera, and a little more deeper dive into those applications. I'm hoping to share this one out. I need to make some tweaks. It may not be as live as it has been seen here. There may be some screenshots that will take the place of the live maps, but where I can, I'll certainly allow that that hands-on driving. So I don't think we have a link on our website yet, and I can work with Russ on that. So if someone wants to check back in the next day or two, they may be able to find that story map link at oldhamcountywater.com.
Okay, perfect. And what I think we can do is I can help out here, and I will get with you right after this webinar, and I'll include that link in the follow-up email that they're going to get. That also includes the link to the recording location, and then we can make sure that they can get that as well. Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Kenny, for the webinar today. It was really great. One quick announcement before we end. For those of you that are still online, we do have our water conference confirmed for 2019. If you're not aware of the Esri Water Conference, it's a 2.5-day conference that focuses on all water. So all the sessions, the presentations, everything's water focused. The entire Esri water practice is there to help answer questions and connect with you. In 2019, we are hosting it in Nashville, Tennessee, and it'll be February 5th, 6th, and 7th. So if you haven't seen that announcement yet, please save the date, and you can find out more information about the Esri Water Conference on our Water Meetup site. Thank you, and I hope you join us again next month.